and welcome to the Lines Megapod Conference Championship Edition. Matt Brown, Stephen Andress, Adam Candee coming to you. Going to break down both of these games, give you all the different angles here, any props that stand out, and of course, any bets that have made our accounts or are close to getting in there somewhere along the way. We are down to the Final Four. It is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens on the AFC side of things. It is the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers on the NFC side of things. Let's kick things off here. Chiefs at the Ravens, our first game on Sunday. It is sitting anywhere an expensive 3.5 to 4 right now in favor of the Ravens at home over the Chiefs. 44 to 44.5 is our total. If you look, relatively easy time for the Ravens this past week. It was a bit of a slog at first, but in the second half made some adjustments and it was pretty much easy sailing from there. That being said, only one offensive score for the Texans in that game, and it was just a field goal. So Ravens defense stepping up, getting it done. The Chiefs do eventually kind of outlast the Bills, and that's kind of how I viewed it. Curious as to how y'all saw that game, but we didn't see much Rashee Rice, who had been the hero for this team over the last few weeks. It was back to the Kelsey train, a lot of Pacheco and things like that. Adam, I'll start with you here in this one. The 3.5s have now started to turn to 4s. It is toggling a little bit now, so people are buying in on the Chiefs at 4. So it seems as if we met the point of resistance. Seems like we're probably going to be looking at expensive 3.5s to 4s all the way up to kickoff. And from a total standpoint, we've seen this thing continually drop. I imagine 44 is kind of our bottom here when it comes to that, but some under money's been coming in throughout the week as well.
All right. As we look at what's on the board right now, fair for me to say that there's really only one side or total between these two games that I have any confidence in. I would have felt a lot better, and I'm sure you guys do if you got it, with Ravens 3 earlier in the week, where it is now 3.5, 4. I don't have any confidence in recommending it. That being said, I think we need to look at the total here. And I know the market has pushed this down to 44, and for me, I feel like that is a good buy point on the over between these two teams. Here's why. It's mostly about the Chiefs, because when I look at the Ravens offensively, I see a Ravens team that can do very well what Buffalo was doing very well and then sort of inexplicably got away from in the second half, because Buffalo in the first half was running the ball all over the Chiefs. And we've known for quite a long time that that is the way that you're going to be able to go after them. Going after them on the outside, throwing the ball is going to be difficult. Good thing for the Ravens, they don't do a lot of that in the first place. So I look at the Kansas City Chiefs on the defensive side and say you can get after them with the run. Now, on the other side of the ball, I think that's really where things get interesting. Last week, the Chiefs had the ball for 22 minutes, and they should have had 34 points. They still ended up with 27. That's a Chiefs offense we haven't seen for a while, right? The quick strike Chiefs offense that doesn't have to have the ball is an offense that has not been there for quite a long time for Kansas City. Now, the Pacheco injury is certainly something to monitor in terms of how they're going to be able to run this offense, because for as good as the Ravens defense is, the one way that they can be had a little bit second half of the season has been to run the ball. They are a bottom 3 team by both EPA per play and success rate against on the defensive side from week 9 on, against just solely against the rush. So the one look for me is over that 44. I believe the Ravens are going to be able to get their points in this game. Mark Andrews coming back is enormous for them to be able to keep working the middle of the field against this Chiefs defense. On the other side, I have confidence here that the Chiefs offense doesn't have to have the ball for all that long to be able to generate something. And I'm not saying generate 24, 30, 31, nothing like that. But I do think the Ravens are probably good for their part of 27 plus in this game, and that doesn't ask a whole lot out of the Chiefs. So I'm going to avoid the side. I like over on the total.
Mark Andrews, as you mentioned, has been activated. He will play. Offensive guard Joe Thuney for the Chiefs, unlikely to play for them in this one. Stephen, I go into the, hey, look, teams can only play who is on their schedule. I just want to give a word of caution if people go in and just look at the surface statistics for the Ravens this season, specifically the Ravens defense, instead of looking, a little bit deeper. I know there's been a lot of talk about, they only gave up this many yards and, they only gave up this many points and things like that. Well, let's go back just the beginning half of the season, just to put that in context and why I'm just saying pump the brakes a tad on just the raw stats by this defense. They got CJ Stroud in his first NFL start. They lost to Gardner Minshew in week 3. They got Dorian Thompson-Robinson in his first NFL start in week 4. They got Kenny Pickett in week 5, who obviously ended up losing his job to Mason Rudolph because he was so terrible. In week 6, Ryan Tannehill gets hurt and they get Malik Willis. The Josh Dobbs Arizona Cardinals version of him in week 8. They blew a 14-point lead to Deshaun Watson, who was also injured in that game and ended up not playing another snap the rest of the season. In week 10, in week 11, they get Joe Burrow, who gets injured, and then Jake Browning takes over for Joe Burrow in that game as well. So just a bit of caution if you're just looking at raw statistics for the Ravens defense. Now, the advanced stats still back up a lot of the stuff that we see, but I know a lot of people are talking about, man, look how few points they gave up all year. Look how few yards they gave up all year. Well, the first 11 games, you can only play who you play. But the first 11 games were very, very fortunate for this Ravens team along the way.
I completely agree with you. I think if you're looking at season-long matchups and those statistics, that's how you get to a number like Lamar Jackson being a 4-point favorite against Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game. I'm going to give the Chiefs a little more credit here off of what many would accuse me of recency bias. And I get it. But also, it's still Patrick Mahomes, and we know what he can do any given week. So maybe I'll look back with 2020 hindsight on Sunday night and say, clearly the Ravens were the side here. They've been the better team, more well-rounded team all year long. But I will go to bed and sleep fine that night if I lose a bet on Patrick Mahomes getting 4 points in the AFC Championship game. So the reason I did it after digging into the numbers, I do think there's something here. I fully concede that it's been, after the embarrassing Christmas loss to the Raiders, it's been against very compromised defenses. 7 yards per play against the Bengals, which we know have a putrid defense this year. 400 yards of offense in below zero temperatures against the Miami Dolphins, who were down their top 3 pass rushers. And I remind everybody that the Chiefs offense, each of the past 2 seasons, 21 and 22, led the NFL in offensive yards per game over 400. This year, they dipped to 8th, around 355 a game. So, again, another indication that the offense is looking much better than it has for a lot of this year. Against the Bills, you guys mentioned it, insanely efficient on only 47 plays, 7.7 yards per play. So, do I think they're going to do that again against this Ravens defense? Do I think they're going to be otherworldly? No, I don't think that. I do think that the answer is probably somewhere in the middle here, right, Matt? Like, I don't think the Ravens are as insanely good defensively as their metrics, but I also don't think the Chiefs are insanely good offensively now like they have been in past years because of what they've did against compromised defenses. But what if they're still above average? It's Patrick Mahomes. What if this offense is still above average? Isn't that enough to keep this game close and cover 4 points? That's ultimately what I concluded. And there's a couple things more X's and O's wise that gives me confidence in that. If you look at the way they've been approaching their offense, it's been widely reported now that Mahomes is getting to the line of scrimmage faster. It's giving him time to dissect defenses pre-snap and try and get an idea of what's coming. That's been a point of emphasis. Their offense has been limiting the pie in terms of how many targets go to their best playmakers and the other guys on this offense who stink and can't be relied on. Over the 3-game stretch, week 17, and then the 2 playoff games, because they didn't play their starters week 18, Kelsey, Rice, and Pacheco have gotten 59% of the targets in the pass game. That's way up from 46% during the regular season. So I like the changes that the Chiefs offense has made, even though one could reasonably argue that it's been against bad competition. So I think if the answer is somewhere in the middle here, I really like getting points with Mahomes here. That's kind of just what I concluded, and I can live with it.
Yeah, I full disclosure, when this hit 4, I actually wasn't thinking I was going to play, but once this hit 4, I did go ahead and take a piece of the Chiefs as well. And you guys know I've been as low on the Chiefs as any team in the NFL comparatively to everybody else over the course of the season. But there's a couple of different things that I just can't shake, which is the fact that the Ravens do rely so incredibly heavy on the run. They were the only NFL team. They were the only NFL team to run more than they passed. 1 out of 32 teams ran more than they passed over the course of the season. It was the Ravens that they did that. And listen, they're insanely efficient at doing it. They're very, very good at doing it. But I cannot help but shake, what does this team look like if it's not as efficient doing that? If it doesn't quite work as much as it has over the course of the season? How do they adjust and how do they get everything done? We know Lamar Jackson, when he is forced to pass and he is under duress, he is a much worse passer. I know most quarterbacks are, but Lamar really kind of falls off a cliff over the course of his career whenever he has gotten a ton of pressure. So I do wonder what these defensive coordinators are going to do against both of these guys, right? I mean, we're looking at two different teams on the defensive side of the ball. The Ravens run man coverage at the 6th highest rate in the NFL. The Chiefs run it at the 8th highest rate. And Adam, one of the things we know about man coverage, it's pretty dangerous against a guy like Lamar Jackson, right? Because your guys are turning and they're running with defenders and they have their backs turned, and Lamar Jackson is going to look and he's going to see, oh, hell, I can take off yet again and yet again and yet again. I wonder if Spags is going to try to mix things up here and change up what he really wants to do on defense, which is play man coverage, because of what Lamar can do with his legs.
I'll add a little bit of context to the idea of the Ravens being the 1 of 32 with rushing, because they also had the quarterback with the second most rushing attempts in football this year. And I think that does change the equation just a little bit when it comes to how defenses are able to plan for your rushing attack, which is exactly what you're getting at right now when you're talking about how Steve Spagnuolo chooses to address them. Now, the strength of that Chiefs defense is definitely with that secondary. Where I think Baltimore can mitigate that, and part of how I will be approaching this game, is to be able to work the middle of the field. And that, to me, works whether you're talking about them playing more man or whether you're just talking about what Lamar ultimately chooses to do. Because you pointed out the fact that they run as much as they do. Last week, Lamar Jackson had 150 passing yards and they had 34 points. And I know that the Kansas City Chiefs are better against the rush than the Texans, but they're not that much better against the run than the Houston Texans. So I believe that if you want to take a look toward a guy like Mark Andrews, we talk all the time about guys coming back off injury where you get a discount that you wouldn't otherwise get. And right now on Mark Andrews, you're looking at plus money on over 3.5 on receptions. You are looking at 34.5 on the receiving yards. I believe you have opportunities there on both toward overs if that's the way that you want to look at this game from a prop perspective. I'm not seeing as many Isaiah Likely numbers yet. Maybe you guys have more of those and want to talk about them, but I don't know that you'll see that kind of number on Mark Andrews, and I do believe that's a way that the Ravens can go about this game, even if Steve Spagnuolo does try to take away their ability to work the outside or their ability to run the ball at the clip that they have.
I do wonder, Steven, and it's another thing about this matchup that's super interesting, right? So Kansas City, kind of under the radar, had the number 1 defensive pressure rate in the entire NFL. They blitz at the 7th highest rate. Lamar Jackson is likely going to feel pressure in this game in some way, shape, or form. The only thing is, when you blitz a lot, it does create running lanes for these quarterbacks if you're not able to get home on all of that. And I don't want to say that I think that the absolute key to this game is whether or not they're going to be able to get home with these blitzes, or if they back off on these blitzes and don't blitz as much as they did over the course of the season. Steve Spagnuolo, as we know, everybody knows this about him, highly, highly aggressive. He ran cover 0 more than any, the Chiefs ran cover 0 more than any team in the NFL. So if you've got a quarterback that can take advantage of that on the outside, it's not even so much that I don't know if Lamar can take advantage of it on the outside. I just don't know if he has the personnel. Like, I don't know if he's got the receivers to take advantage of that. I mean, these are really, really good corners for the Chiefs that really have prevented big plays and really prevented touchdowns all season long, and which is why he can run that cover zero and not have to worry about the safety help. And so if he can do that, and I don't know, it is a very interesting matchup to me. It's I think this is definitely more of a chess match than people are giving it credit for here, because is he going to do that? Is he going to say, okay, Lamar, I dare you with these receivers that you have that are young and kind of inexperienced to be able to beat my guys whenever we're coming at you with cover zero. So I don't know. I'm with you, Stan. It's just, to me, I have Patrick Mahomes. I have an offense that, yes, not as good as years past, but I still have the best quarterback in the NFL, maybe in the history of the NFL. I have a very established coach and play caller. And if I am down 10 points in the fourth quarter, I am still live to cover my bet. I'm not necessarily saying the Chiefs are going to pull the upset here, but you're catching 4 points in a game where you can be down 10 in the fourth quarter and you're still live. The 7.5 is available out there right now. You are still live even if they decide to kick the field goal, down 10 and then come back. So all of that to me is just, the 3.5s out there and the 4s and stuff, you could take that on a teaser leg to the over the 10 side of things if you wanted to do that. If you're into the 2-game teaser stuff this week, I just don't see a world in which this Ravens team is 4 points better than the Chiefs.
So if the season ratings are correct, then and the Chiefs offense has been a product of just terrible defenses, then I can see a world where the Ravens are better than this current spread. But I'm, like I said, I'll go to the mat with Patrick Mahomes. If I lose, I lose. It's fine. The one you guys talked about, Lamar Jackson and his scrambling ability, and if it's man defense, then there's going to be lanes. The one caveat to that I would say is keep an eye on the injury report for Willie Gay for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's been back-to-back limited participant this week. He's the guy that is the spy, right? He spies for Kansas City's defense. If he's not playing or gets hurt in the middle of the game, then maybe some live overs on Lamar Jackson rushing yards. I mean, Josh Allen had 70-plus rushing yards and 2 touchdowns last week when Gay was banged up. So that's one angle I'd be keeping an eye on.
And to add something to that, Matt, before you go on, we're not just talking about scrambling ability. We're talking about design runs as well, because I think it's a really important distinction to make when we talk about this Ravens offense and what the Chiefs ultimately have to prepare for.
The other thing to keep in mind, guys, like if you're looking to play an under on Lamar, just remember, like wait until 10 minutes before kickoff. Like it is going to be one-way traffic late on all these like prop stuff for like a Lamar, and like it is going to be nothing but over money coming in on him. And so you're going to get a much better on the under. And if you are playing an over, I would recommend getting in as soon as humanly possible on those rush yards, because not only is it going to steam up, but we got to remember this. They are still the favored team in this game. And the reason every single yard matters, remember, kneel downs count against your rushing total, right? And so, like, if you're looking at the difference between 64.5 and 67.5, which, by the way, are available right now out in the market. I mean, it's a 3-yard difference. 3 knees. I mean, like, seriously, like 3 knees. It is a big deal for a guy like Lamar when you're talking about a pretty high rushing total and 3-4 yards differences in the numbers that you're going to be able to get. So again, just like if you want to play an over, as soon as you hear this, go play the over now. If you want to play the under, just literally wait until 10 minutes before kickoff. It is going to be one-way traffic on the over. I guess, what would be your guess, guys? So the market high right now is 67.5. I bet you this gets on the other side of 70. That would be my guess by the time this thing kicks off.
Wouldn't surprise me for sure.
No,
100 yards last week in a playoff game.
I think that's fair, Matt. I would add a piece of context, something to think about when it comes to Lamar Jackson and what you just said. If what you're thinking about is Lamar and his ability to run, then what I would add is look at attempts, because if you think that they're going to be in a situation where they're kneeling, if you think that your game script is Ravens win because of Lamar's ability to run the ball, and you think there are going to be kneel downs at the end of this game, then you're adding on the rushing attempts. Right now, you're looking at 10.5 as the number on the rushing attempts. The same way it takes away from your equity on yards, it adds to your equity when it comes to rushing attempts.
Yep, absolutely. You could almost do a mini hedge there too. Like you could, 75% on the yardage and 25% on the carries or something, just to give you a little bit if you wanted to go in that direction. All right, let's put a bow on this game as we move on. But I guess the other big question here is, how effective can Mark Andrews be in this game? I mean, this is a guy that we know was the security blanket for Lamar Jackson. This offense was exponentially better when he was in there. He was the go-to guy. They had to kind of explore around and try and figure out who's going to be the guy. Lamar spread it around pretty well. Didn't really hone in on anybody past that. We know the target hog in this offense was, in fact, Mark Andrews. We're speculating, guys, but let's do this. I mean, he supposedly was close to going last week, is going this week. Adam, I'll start with you. Like, are you expecting what percent of the snaps? Are you thinking this is kind of like he plays in the red zone type territory? Or are you thinking like with Laporta, which I was completely wrong, which is why I'm trying to stay away from guessing people's injuries and all that. Like, Laporta played damn near every snap coming back off of what we thought might be a season-ending knee injury. So I wouldn't put it past Mark Andrews to play 70 or 80% of these snaps.
Well, part of what you have to factor in is the fact that the Ravens are a team that will do anything out of multiple tight end sets in the first place, right? So if they're not necessarily a team where personnel dictates what type of play you're going to get, I think that adds to the fact that Mark Andrews might be even more active. Look, I told you earlier in the podcast, I think Mark Andrews overs are a very good spot. They're probably my favorite prop spot in this game, maybe other than Pacheco rush unders, even though I do believe Kansas City is going to try to run the ball at some point in this game. I'm more on Ravens than I am on Chiefs here, and I believe that Kansas City's probably going to be chasing in this game. We were even talking about it a minute ago, right? If they're down 10, you're trying to chase and get inside that 4. I think Kansas City is going to be in a spot where they don't necessarily have the luxury of being able to run Pacheco as much as they would like to. And if he's dealing with an injury, he also might end up in more of decoy status than the usual rushing that he's able to do. So for me, when it comes to Mark Andrews, I really do like the depressed numbers that are on him, because I don't think he has to play a full share in order to get to the numbers that are there for him.
Yeah, a couple of different props I looked at in this game. They're not in the account yet, but might make it in there. Probably will make it in there. So weirdly enough, Nelson Aguilar. So if we're talking a lot of cover zero, right? And we're talking just one-on-ones with these corners for the Chiefs, Aguilar's like a burner, right? Like he has one route. His route tree is a straight line. And so if Lamar is going to get that cover zero and he's got a one-on-one, if he's going to chunk it up in a direction, it's 14.5 yards for Aguilar. So it's one catch. He's not going to get volume, but you're basically betting on one catch for him. I think that's at least somewhat interesting along the way. And to Adam's point, if you believe at all that Pacheco is going to be limited in this and you are a Ravens backer, then you would be looking at basically all Pacheco unders, because obviously if they get down, they're going to be throwing the ball. And if he's hurt, he's not going to be the one that's in there catching the passes or anything like that. And then, again, if you think that he could be limited at all by this toe, then you'd be looking at unders as well. Again, stuff that you wait and bet right before game time, because all of those numbers are also going to creep up throughout the course of the week. Steven, any final thoughts here on this one? From a prop standpoint, from a total standpoint, from a side standpoint, or just any nuggets?
A couple Chiefs props. I'll give our teammate Mo Noir a lot of credit for these. He found them, and I dug into more numbers on them, and I agree with him on these. while you guys make excellent points on unders for usage and yardage for Pacheco, I still think we're getting a really good price here on him for an anytime touchdown. You can get plus 140 right now, up to that price as we record on Friday afternoon. He's the bell cow. Like, that should not be the price for a bell cow running back in the Chiefs offense. And even if you're looking at regular season usage before his usage got even higher, when they're inside the 10-yard line this season, Pacheco's gotten 20 carries. CEH only had 5. McKinnon had 1. McKinnon's on IR, so he's not a factor now. And the only 2 times CEH has scored a touchdown this season were a game where Pacheco had a hamstring injury, so he was limited that week, and a game where Pacheco didn't play at all. So this is all Pacheco, except for last week when they tried to give Mecole Hardman the ball and he fumbled it through the end zone. So I'm pretty sure Andy Reid's not going to make that mistake again this week. So yeah,
we'd like to think
you would like to think. So I think Pacheco's price for a touchdown is good. And while we're talking about Mecole Hardman, Mo astutely pointed out that Kadarius Toney was a full participant in practice on Wednesday. Now was limited on Thursday, but if he's going to be active and playing, are we sure Mecole Hardman's even going to get any snaps in this game? So even though he's being lined at 1.5 receptions, I found a book where you can get under half a reception at like plus 230, plus 240 on Mecole Hardman. I'm not sure he's going to get a target in this game. And if he's still active, then those bets would cash. So if Tony's active, I like just taking some extreme unders on Mecole Hardman.
Adam, I want to get your final thoughts here as well. My final one, and this is more of like a same game parlay type one here. I don't know if this is a singular bet you want to put in your account, but Justice Hill has really chipped away at Gus Edwards' snaps. And so it wouldn't surprise me if this is more of a 50-50 type split in this game. And so I don't really love betting people to do things that isn't their primary job, but like Justice Hill's receiving yards is 13.5. If he's getting 50% of the snaps, or maybe he even ends up getting 55% of the snaps or something like that with Gus Edwards on the sideline. And specifically, like, if there is a world, which I don't think any of us would be shocked if the Ravens were trailing in this game or something, then Justice Hill's going to get all the work and it's not going to be Gus Edwards. And so anyway, a guy that's been chipping into the workload anyway at 13.5 receiving yards is pretty interesting to me. I think you're looking at a guy that can get there in 2 or 3 catches. And certainly if the game script goes against them, then that would be a slam dunk on the over of 13.5. Adam, your final thoughts.
I'll tell you this much. While we were talking in the last 30 seconds, the rushing line at DraftKings moved up on Justice Hill. So there are people out there who are thinking the usage will be what you think it'll be. It went from 34.5 to 35.5. And if you think it's a 50-50 split and you think the Ravens are going to run the way that the Ravens tend to run, then I think you're plus EV on that just based on usage before you even start to factor in anything else. So I like the thought when it comes to that. If you're thinking same game parlay and you're thinking the way that I'm thinking about this game, I want anything that attacked the middle of the field, right? And I would take that and I would look at the Baltimore Ravens and I would say, how do they get after the middle of the field? And then I would also look at the outside and say, and how do I also say, maybe not as much OBJ, maybe not as much Rashad Bateman, right? Like maybe those are guys where I'm looking to put some unders together with some middle of the field overs on guys like Mark Andrews if I really want to lean into what I think the correlation is of how the Ravens will go after the Chiefs.
Let's look at our second game here, the NFC Championship. It is the Detroit Lions on the road at the San Francisco 49ers. And I'll tell you, this is going to be 7 or 7.5, and I can't begin to tell you where it's going to be by the time you watch this video, because since we have been recording this, it has flashed between 7 and 7.5 at multiple books, multiple times. And so this game's starting to get some action. It seems as if the 49ers backers will take the 7. It seems as if the Lions backers are coming in and gladly scooping up the 7.5. It seems to be that's where we're going to end up here with this one. A total as sitting majority across the industry at 51.5. Steven, the 49ers, I think I think it's fair to say escaped last week in a win. It was a game in which the Packers did not take advantage of multiple different opportunities that were presented to them. And with that, the 49ers were able to find a way to win the game. Now, there's something to be said for playing your C-, D+ game and still winning. Like, there's something to be said for that. Lots of teams play their C- game and they get housed. Lots of teams play their D+ game and get housed. And the 49ers did not and were able to keep it close enough along the way to figure out a way to get it done against the Packers. That said, we are still sitting on the other side of a touchdown if you want to back the Lions. Of course, you can get a expensive 7 if you want to back the 49ers. What are you looking at here in this one?
I've been fighting this all week, and I've concluded that I'm not letting recency bias from last week cloud my judgment here on the 49ers. And I will certainly concede that with how scared Kyle Shanahan coached last week and some of the decisions he made, I'm not exactly comfortable laying this many points. But if we are sticking to our process and looking at these teams' ratings for most of the season, I don't understand why it would only be 7. So I would bet the Niners at 7. I'm going to stop at 7.5. I want the push equity with 7. They played the Lions this week. They're 7. Last week, they were 10.5 against the Packers. And just one man's opinion, I'd take the Packers over the Lions right now. You know, if they played again this week, I would bet on the Packers, especially if they're getting 3. I just think they're the more well-rounded team. I think starting with the Lions defense and their pass defense, they have gotten extremely lucky for a month and a half straight now, where they're completely relying on turnover variance going their way. They're getting run up and down the field in terms of yards per play in 2 consecutive playoff games now, the latest by Baker Mayfield. So if the turnover variance doesn't go their way, they're going to give up a crap ton of points in this game to the San Francisco 49ers. Offensively for the Niners, I'm going to give Brock Purdy a pass. That was not the first game we've seen Brock Purdy struggle in the rain and not have accuracy the way he does most of the season. So I fully admit they should have lost that game. There were dropped interceptions. That's going to happen any given week with Brock Purdy, but looks like clear skies for this game. I'm not as worried about not having Deebo Samuel here. And for the 49ers defense, I mean, overall, I agree with you, Matt. Like, if you're going to give him a grade, barely passing might even be generous for last week, but I thought the defense played really well. They were put in some tough spots. Overall, they finished the game with Jordan Love having fewer than 200 passing yards and 2 picks. I thought, and I still think, the narrative that the Niners aren't good against the run is a bit overstated and a bit exaggerated. Aaron Jones did finish with 100 yards last week, but 53 of them came on 1 rush. And if you take that one away, he only averaged 3.2 yards per carry against this 49ers defense. They are also playing now a compromised Lions offensive line. Without Jonah Jackson, most likely, Frank Ragnow continues to play hurt, and it's a Niners front 4 that has gotten pressure at a league average rate despite having a bottom 3 blitz rate this season. And I believe that their pressure rate would have been much higher if Eric Armstead didn't miss as many games as he did. He's back now. They're back at full strength, and they were certainly a factor in that game against Jordan Love last week. So now Jared Goff has to deal with pressure and 7 guys in coverage, unlike last week where it's been coming from the blitz when they're facing Tampa Bay. So believe it or not, I actually think 7 is a little bit of a discount on the 49ers here. And I just hope and pray that the 4th down variance and Kyle Shanahan coaching scared and Dan Campbell going guns blazing and going for every 4th down situation doesn't go against me, because that's the situation where I think I lose the bet.
All right. I will a quick little rebuttal here.
Sure.
So this whole Purdy in the rain thing is the most ridiculously overblown thing in like I've basically ever heard. He had the 7th highest turnover worthy play percentage in the NFL over the course of the season. He just puts the ball in danger. It's not one highlight, one clip of a guy wiping his hand, like in the middle of a drop back, has now turned into this whole thing of like, oh my God, it was all the rain's fault against Brock Purdy. The ball didn't get away from him in that game when he put it squarely in the numbers of the defender who dropped the pick six. That was just a bad read and a bad throw, and that was just all it was to it. Like, there wasn't anything about the rain with that at all. The guy had the 11th most turnover-worthy plays in the NFL, despite having only the 28th most dropbacks having the 20th most dropbacks of any quarterback in the NFL. Like, and it's just one of those deals where I think we're looking at this by one highlight that ended up making things viral that really is just not really, it's just not the narrative. Brock Purdy has just been he's put the ball in danger all season long. It's not the rain that made it happen. That's just who he is. Now, that isn't anything against necessarily this team in general and this offense. I still think it's fantastic and awesome, but just a pushback to all of that is like, this guy just puts the ball in danger. That's just who Brock Purdy is. Another thing that I've heard, because I will bring up that I think this offense is different whenever Deebo Samuel isn't out on the field. And then I get, people come in this week going like, yeah, but you're discrediting. It's not that. That's lazy. It was Trent Williams that wasn't out there, and that's the reason why. Well, Deebo Samuel missed 3 games this season. One of those games Trent Williams played. Like, Trent Williams played in week 6. So there was only 2 games in which Trent Williams didn't play when Deebo Samuel wasn't out there. In those games, Brock Purdy was sacked 1 time in week 7 against the Vikings. He was sacked twice in week 8 against the Bengals. If you look in week 7 and 8, 2.84 seconds time to throw, which was 11th in the NFL. Weeks 1 to 6, in which he had Trent Williams out there, 2.44 seconds to throw, which was 31st in the NFL. Like, there's just a lot of things that I think people look at and they just go surface level with it without actually digging in and looking at what the numbers actually say for everything. And Adam can make fun of me all he wants to. I don't care at all. I mean, like, we're talking about,
you have no idea what I'm making fun of, so keep going.
That we're looking at, but it's like, if you actually look at the numbers behind like some of these narratives, they don't add up. So anyway, with that, I turn it over to you, Adam.
I was making fun of my lack of utility on this podcast because you guys were 10 minutes deep there before I started bringing in. I'm actually with you, Matthew. You thought I was making fun of you, but I'm with you that the Deebo thing matters. And it matters a lot. And it matters because specifically of the games that you talked about and the look at this offense that we had. There's something that is a weird Voltron about this offense where when all of the pieces are not there, it doesn't go down incrementally. It just kind of falls apart. And I don't understand what it is. And it's happened with Trent Williams and it's happened with Deebo Samuel. It's happened to a degree with Christian McCaffrey, MVP finalist, LOL. What I don't understand is how we can look at a compromised Lions offensive line, a compromised Deebo Samuel, and still see the kind of number that is sitting on this game. So I told you earlier, there's really only truly one side or total that I feel confident about. That, of course, is the one that I mentioned over on Chiefs and Ravens. But if you made me bet anything in this game, I would be betting under on 51.5. Now, as Matt would tell you, as anyone would tell you, you're probably going to see 52 before this is all said and done. So, and you're going to want 52 if it's available. So wait if you want to play the under like I would like to play. But I think there are way more paths to under in this game than there are to over. Let's talk about the Lions for a second, because that's the team we really haven't spent as much time on. What's their best win this year, guys? Kansas City game, right? Like we probably go back to them beating KC on opening night in a game in which they scored 14 points on offense. They got the fluky Kadarius Toney knock up in the air and Brian Branch run back, and they win the game by 1 in Kansas City. And again, they won the game. You're not going to take anything away from them. They don't have another win that really means much of anything for the remainder of the season. And they should have lost to the Rams. That part is clear. They could have lost to the Bucs. game was tied going into the fourth quarter. And they're going with such a massive step up in class right now that the one thing I feel confident about is that the Lions aren't going to be able to score the way that they've been scoring. So for me, I don't want to try to get into what's going to happen to the Niners on offense without Debo. But what I do feel more confident about is that the Lions weren't going to be able to score on San Francisco the way they've scored the last couple of weeks in the first place. And with that offensive line being what it is, I worry even more about their ability to put up points.
The total, if anything, I'd probably lean towards the under, but at the same time, it kind of goes against, I guess, my thinking here. I took 7. I don't even have the best of it and came back in for more 7.5 on the Lions. And I loved the 10 with the Packers against the 49ers. Well, if you look, every single thing about this Lions team is better than the Packers. You're taking Goff over Love. You're taking Amon-Ra St. Brown over any receiver that the Packers put on the field out there. You're taking Laporta over any of the tight end options for the Packers. You're taking the offensive line from the Lions over the Packers offensive line 10 times out of 10, even with Jonah Jackson being out. It was still the second best offensive line in all the NFL over the course of the 2023 season. Am I saying that it's going to be the same without one of their components? Obviously not, but it doesn't just completely fall apart. So if I loved the Packers last week to be able to move the ball and score against the 49ers, I don't know why my opinion would fundamentally change, given the fact that we have a much more efficient offense in basically every single facet, specifically the run game and specifically with the two-headed monster that they have out of the backfield as well. So I don't know why my opinion would change from an offensive perspective of what the opposing offense can do against this San Francisco defense that not bad, but league average, right? Not bad, but league average. And so with that, getting one of the top 5 most efficient offenses in the NFL, I'm fairly confident that that they'll be able to kind of keep this thing within a touchdown.
Yeah, I guess we just fundamentally disagree on Packers offense versus Lions offense. Right now, today, I don't know who's taking Jared Goff over Jordan Love. Now Jordan Love's out of the playoffs, so I don't have the choice to take Jordan Love at the moment.
Because he played the Niners.
Well, yeah, because he played the Niners. I don't necessarily think that, and I look at the metrics over the second half of the season, starting from week 9 on, when this Packers team started to look like the Packers team that we recognized for a lot of this season. And I see the Packers 3rd in EPA per play, and I see the Lions 4th. I see Jared Goff down around 10th for EPA CPOE composite, and Jordan Love up at 3rd. So for me, I'm not saying the Lions offense is bad by any stretch of the imagination. They've put up points in both of their playoff games. I think this is a massive step up in class, however, for what they're going to go against with the 49ers pass rush in particular. And so, look, if their offensive line does what it's been able to do for a lot of the season and gives Jared Goff time for his weapons to get open, then maybe they do ultimately put up points. I think that's going to be a challenge overall for the Lions to do offensively what they've done for the last couple of weeks against the Rams and Bucks against the Niners.
Matt, let me put you on the spot.
Yep.
If the Lions and the Packers played on a neutral field this week, you're laying 3 points with the Lions?
What does that have to do with anything? Like what? Literally, what does that have to do with anything?
Well, they're playing the same opponent 2 weeks in a row. Fundamentally, to take this price for the Lions, in my opinion, you have to have them rated significantly higher than the Packers. So I'm just trying to see if you agree with that. I don't. I just disagree that the Lions should be rated this much better than the Packers, and you should be getting this price. I think there's recency bias on what the Niners looked like last week. It's all relative, right? I mean, yes, we can look and say that the Packers over the second half of the season were comparable to the Lions, which they were. Adam just listed off the stats. I mean, it's like it's micro fractions of things or whatever. I mean, they're comparable, right? The full body of work for the Lions is more impressive and has been over the course of the season. The consistency from week in, week out. And I understand that in a vacuum,
we could say that you would take Jordan Love over Jared Goff. I don't go against some of the old school mindset stuff here of experience does matter, and being able to handle some of the things that are going to be thrown your way does matter. We are talking about a quarterback that has a good run in the playoffs and has playoff experience, and all of that is. So again, like, yes, in a vacuum, who would I rather have moving forward to man my franchise? It might be Jordan Love, but like in an NFC championship game on the road, I would probably take Jared Goff, and I'm being dead serious when I say that. Like, I don't think that that's like crazy to say, given when you take some of the external factors that we can't really put into actual numbers and metrics.
Listen, I will concede that I'm concerned that Brock Purdy is going to get pressured in this game.
Third highest pressure rate in the NFL are the Lions.
Right. And yeah. I've said on more than one occasion on this pod that I think 4/5 of the Niners offensive line are below average pass blockers. So it's incumbent on Shanahan to scheme up some quick hitters and some yak. So if he does, this Lions team was top 5 in missed tackles, and the Niners are the yak kings of the NFL offensively. So that's not good for the Lions defense. But, credit to Brett Gibbons on our staff here for finding this. I think one of my favorite props in this game is George Kittle over 61.5 receiving yards, not just because of the Deebo Samuel situation, but because if you look at the splits of the games where Purdy is pressured more, his targets go way up. In the games where Purdy's pressured 15 plus times, Kittle's averaging almost 8 targets per game. In the games where he's not pressured, or if he's pressured fewer than 15 times, he's only averaging about 4.5 targets per game. Now, what I wanted to check was, well, is that because he's staying in to block and helping with the pass protection? Is that why? Is like a chicken and egg thing here? And I don't think that's the case, because overall this season, Kittle has actually run more routes than Brandon Ayuk has, and they both played the same number of games this season. So I don't think it's a blocking thing. So I think Kittle's in for a big game here. I like over 61.5 in those 6 games where Purdy has been pressured 15 plus times. Kittle's actually gone over 75 yards in all 6 of them, and the prop's at 61.5 here. So that's the one prop I like.
I think it's tough to play Niners props until we know Deebo's situation, because he just affects things so many ways. I'll tell you the one thing that I do think is an interesting look with or without Deebo. You just mentioned Brandon Ayuk. Right now, Ayuk over 5.5 receptions is plus money. Guys, if we watched how bad these Detroit Lions corners are, like, this is one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. I think Brandon Ayuk is going to be able to be as open as he would like to be, and that's not going to matter necessarily to whether Deebo Samuel is on the field, because at 5.5, I'm not asking for an outsized target share to get there on Brandon Ayuk. And I also think we've seen with San Francisco that this offense doesn't stop, right? Like, this offense doesn't get to a point where they just shut it down. They're going to keep continuing to put up points if they're able to be in a situation where Brock Purdy hasn't been, knocked out of the game and is trying to throw with his left arm like last year.
Yeah, it is. I look to, and we keep talking about like the defense that we talked about with the first game. I wonder in this one. So the Niners run the 7th highest zone percentage in the entire NFL on the defensive side of the ball. We know Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown go and just find these little holes in the defense, and specifically Laporta. I do wonder if we see more man in this one than they typically want to run. I do wonder if they're going to allow Goff to kind of not have to deal with that so much and just look for the little soft spots and the holes and stuff, which again, they were able to thrive on over the course of the year. A lot of that having to do with the addition of Sam Laporta to this offense. I do wonder what San Francisco is going to do to maybe combat that a little bit in the game. I'm with you though, Stephen. Like last week, I know that we were talking about the vulnerabilities. If there is a big one of the 49ers defense would be the run defense. And listen, the season long stats and even the short-term stats kind of bear that out a little bit. I do wonder how much of that is by design to where they want you to do something that's less efficient than passing the ball on them. So again, I'll give them some credit on that front, but we are getting a Lions team that is incredibly efficient at running the ball, right? And that two-headed monster is certainly something that has worked out for them. And the more that they use Gibbs, it seems like the better this offense gets. So I wonder if early on would be something that we could kind of look at. You know, there's in-game props, right? I mean, guys, if you don't open your apps once you make your bets, I mean, like these props change dynamically throughout the course of the game. I do wonder if we see that the offensive line for the Lions isn't looking as bad as we thought, and they are having some success on the ground. I wonder if looking at maybe like a Montgomery or a Gibbs, depending on, you know, what the prop number is in game, might be something to look at as well, because I think the Lions, at the end of the day, whether Dan Campbell wants to admit it or not, would like to play ball control here and would like to just try and control this game, and certainly don't want to have McCaffrey and Ayuk and Kittle and all them out on the field as much.
Yeah, and you know he's in an underdog role here. He's going to go for it, right? Like any fourth down situation that's close and analytically, even if it's a coin flip, he might go for it.
Yeah.
So they're totally playing with house money at this point, and that's kind of why I said that at the beginning, where that's the one part about laying 7 with the Niners that makes me uncomfortable, because, you know, Mr. lost the Super Bowl 28-3 is still being ultra conservative in these games, just trying to get to the finish line with at least one more point than his opponent. And, you know, you have the complete opposite on the other sideline with Dan Campbell here. So, you know, I'm a Niners fan.
Yeah,
I fully admit it. I have been nervous a lot of these weeks. I was far more nervous last week than I am this week. I'll just say that.
Adam, to put a bow on this one, I think to Steven's point, it like could work for you or work against you if you're on the Lions side. Like that's actually the thing that terrifies me as a Lions backer in this, because if you are passing on the threes when it's borderline or even kind of against you, the decision, and you're passing on the threes for the sevens and the sevens don't come, that is the scenario in which this game like gets out of hand, right? I mean, that is if you are foregoing points altogether against this 49ers team, which I do expect to be able to score on this Lions secondary, as most teams have all year long. That is the thing that actually terrifies me with the plus 7.5 is, hey, he makes 2 bad fourth down calls, and then at that point, it's just too far gone.
It's another reason that I like under, because I think it actually puts you in a spot where I like the 49ers defensively against the Lions. And so if I like that, then that leans into where I'm looking overall. And Steven and I talked about this last week when we talked about the idea of field goals versus touchdowns, and saying, yeah, if I'm on an under, I want field goals. But that being said, there's something really specific in this handicap for me in terms of what I think the Niners are going to be able to do defensively that leans me more toward that under based on the aggressiveness.
Well, you also have two offenses that are, you know, Niners are 30th in pass play percentage this year. Lions are outside the top 20. Like these two teams want to run the ball. So when the total starts with a 5, that's also a pretty good starting point. I agree with Adam on the under here.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing I would look at just from a futures standpoint in all of this, guys, if you are, you know, like kind of looking ahead in all of this stuff, like, you know, there are Super Bowl, you know, there are Super Bowl MVP markets that are already up. There are all that. I mean, like if you honestly think that the Lions are going to upset the 49ers and win this game outright, like Jared Goff is 9-1 to win Super Bowl MVP. You should almost make an accompanying bet with that, because if he makes it to the Super Bowl alone, the fact that he would be a quarterback in the Super Bowl, it's going to be 160 or 170 or something like that, right? I mean, like if you honestly think so, you're putting in a bet. If you honestly and truly believe that they're going to upset the 49ers, you should just make a companion bet of Goff with Super Bowl MVP and different little things like that you could look at specifically for these underdog teams, because you're going to get more value on all of that stuff today than you're going to get when they actually advance.
Yeah,
I'll give you my. Sorry, Adam. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to the thought, like earlier in the week, Lions were sitting around 7-1 for Super Bowl, and think about what Matt's saying. Would you rather have 7-1 or 9-1? There's no way the Lions are winning the Super Bowl if Jared Goff does not play superhuman football for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'll give you my favorite Super Bowl MVP long shot right now. It's George Kittle. I think that look at the spread. The Niners are highly likely to at least get there. I talked to you about the splits when Brock Purdy is pressured. If they get there, they're playing a super blitz happy team in the Chiefs or the number one sack team in the NFL in the Ravens. That probably means more targets for George Kittle if we trust these splits. And in the first matchup against the Ravens, he had more than 100 yards in that game, did George Kittle. And we all know that the media loves to not give Brock Purdy credit for this offense. So if there's any team that's going to have a Super Bowl MVP that's not the quarterback, maybe it's the Niners, and you can get 110-1 on George Kittle right now.
I think there's a reason, I mean, look, I understand why you like the price. It's just that where we are with quarterbacks in the MVP discourse in particular,
very unlikely, I admit.
George Kittle's going to have 150 and 3 touchdowns to even be considered for that award. And at that point, it's still probably Purdy.
I mean, there's a Super Bowl where Mahomes had like barely 250 yards, only 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions against the Niners. And I thought Damian Williams should have won that MVP at like over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. They still gave it to Patrick Mahomes. So your point is very well taken. Maybe there's a situation where that happens and Brock Purdy has 2 picks and Kittle's got 100 yards and 2 touchdowns and he gets it. I agree with you, though. It's a very small likelihood, and I'm just talking like pizza money for funsies bet here on Kittle.
One last bet here, guys. Like, they have the most XYZ stuff for conference championship week. Most rushing yards. Now, the favorite's McCaffrey, as it should be, at minus 130. Lamar is 4-1. And
knew you were going there.
And like, here's the thing. There is a world that exists that the 49ers just pass all over the Lions, right? Yeah. And like, McCaffrey finishes with not a bad game, but like 75 rushing yards or 80 rushing yards or something like that. Lamar, there's definitely a world that exists that Lamar runs for 110 yards in this game. Like that is 100% a world that exists. And at 4-1 for me, like if we run this sim 4 times, like Lamar's the leading rusher this week, definitely 1 out of 4 times. And so for me, the 4-1 on Lamar is pretty interesting and pretty juicy for me.
I like it. I agree with you. I think I like that price.
All right, everyone, the articles for all of this that Steven and everybody in the team does over at TheLines.com. Be sure and take advantage of that if you haven't already. This channel, absolutely free. And while football season is coming to an end, we will continue on rocking and rolling, golf content, basketball content, college basketball content, all of that stuff as well. And then, of course, Major League Baseball is right around the corner. So be sure, subscribe, everything we do. Absolutely free here. And if you want to continue this discussion, upper right-hand corner of TheLines.com is our Discord button. That too, absolutely free, where you can discuss everything that's going on in the sports world with all of your friends and the line staff as well. For Adam, for Steven, I'm Matt. Good luck on all your championship bets.